Today on The Big Story, more than 11,000 scientists worldwide have declared a climate emergency. India has rejected mega trade pact RCEP. What does this mean for India and Prime Minister Modi? The Mandai Wildlife Bridge unveiled to help animals cross the road safely. Find out more. Hello and welcome to The Big Story, where we'll discuss the top news of today and explain why it matters. I'm Dylan Ang, coming to you live from the Straits Times newsroom. Now, for our first story, more than 11,000 scientists from a wide range of disciplines have come together to declare that we are currently in a climate emergency. One of the solutions these experts from 153 countries are proposing: fewer humans on the planet. This is in addition to getting the world to replace fossil fuels with renewable energy. This is the first time a large group of scientists have formally labelled climate change an emergency. Here with us to discuss this is environment correspondent Audrey Tan. Hey Audrey.
Hi Dylan.
Thanks for being in the show. Now Audrey, how does this study differ from previous scientific assessments that has been published before?
The main difference would be in the tone of the paper. So the science behind what they're saying is not new. So we all know the impacts of climate change, things like melting sea ice, lessening sea ice, melting glaciers, which are land ice, rising temperatures, growing concentrations of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere. All these have also been outlined in the latest study.
Right.
But what is different is the tone. So this is the first time that scientists have actually come together to declare climate change as a crisis. And the main reason for this is the previous reports that have been talked about a lot previously came from the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. So as the name suggests, IPCC, Intergovernmental Panel, all the reports that are published have to be approved line by line by all the governments of the world. So that would actually, the science has been quite clear that humans are responsible for climate change. This is not the stance that some countries agree with. So because IPCC works on a consensus basis, if you don't get all the countries agreeing on the use of certain words, you don't get to see that in the final report.
Right.
But in the latest study that was published in a scientific journal, you don't need to go through that same processes of approval by all the different governments of the world. So you can see that they are basing their report on science. It is quite clear and unequivocal in terms of the science that humans are driving climate change and that the impacts are quite drastic.
Right, so let's get into it. What are some of the solutions proposed by these scientists? So
the scientists have put forward 6 broad policy proposals, and this is also different from previous reports because the IPCC reports, they do not prescribe policies. So they just lay out the science and they let governments decide what to do with that. So for this particular report, they have actually issued policy recommendations in 6 broad areas. But I'm going to zoom in on 2 particular areas because the authors have actually pointed out economic growth and population growth as one of the 2 key drivers of causing climate change. So one of the, in terms of proposals for the economy, the scientists are saying that maybe instead of using GDP as a gauge for growth, we should look at other things. So like the preservation of natural ecosystems for one, that's one of the policy proposals. And for population growth, they are saying that maybe we should look at limiting population growth because humans consume stuff, and whenever you consume, you are causing emissions. So they are suggesting population growth be limited in a way that is also sensitive to human rights issues. So things like providing education for everyone, primary and secondary education, and also about adequate family planning that should be made accessible to everyone.
Right. Thanks, Audrey. I think let's all do our part whenever and wherever we can. And I hope that we hope that the people in charge will take some action soon. So once again, thanks for coming on the show. Of course, we have Audrey coming on to talk about the Mandai Bridge later on in the show. So stay tuned for that. Now, moving on to our next story, India has chosen not to join a mega trade pact involving 15 other countries called the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership, or RCEP. It involves ASEAN's 10 member states, along with China, India, Japan, South Korea, Australia, and New Zealand. Now combined, they contribute to 1/3 of the world's GDP, and they have said they are ready to sign the deal next year. What does this move mean for India and Prime Minister Narendra Modi? Now, the Straits Times US Bureau Chief Nirmal Ghosh spoke to our foreign correspondents to find out more on his show Asian Insider. And here are the key highlights.
So, Ravi, perhaps we should start with you. What was India's rationale? And from India's point of view, there's been a mixed reaction in India. There's been a lot of praise, actually, for India's decision. Has it been the right decision? What are the dynamics?
Well, it's not for me to judge whether it's the right decision for India. But clearly, within India, there's been significant rethink about the merits of certain FTAs. And it goes back to the last 2 or 3 years when, after Mr. Modi took power, there was a rethink about the trade deals done by the Manmohan Singh government. You know, they were accelerated during Manmohan Singh's government, including the one with Singapore, which we call SICA, which is the biggest trade deal that India has ever done. Now, there used to be something called the Planning Commission of India, and its successor is called Niti Aayog. Now, Niti Aayog has done studies which show that the FTAs have not really worked for India. And overall, there's been a relook at the merits of these FTAs. I think Mr. Modi sort of leaned towards the inevitable, given that his own economy has not been performing too well lately. Growth has been, it's been last 5-6 quarters have been really dismal. I think he just took all these into consideration and decided to get out of this.
Economic and political realities and also opposition from within.
Yes.
Right. So, Vikram, what are the upsides and the downsides now of India not being part of this enormous trade pact?
Well, the upsides are, first of all, it is able to stave off competition from lower cost imports, right? And there's a whole lot of industries that it wants to protect. For example, in the farm sector, there's the dairy industry, which is strong actually in Mr. Modi's home state of Gujarat. Okay, there's that. Then there's textiles, and there's a whole range of other manufacturing industries, from which India would have a tough time competing vis-a-vis China and some ASEAN countries. So it gets to stave off this competition. Then it has more freedom of action to raise tariffs if it wants to, which it would not be able to do if it signed on to RCEP. So that's another upside. Then it avoids having to implement the tough reforms to get its manufacturing sector up to speed. Right? These tough reforms are things like labor reforms, land reforms, and so on. Now, those are very difficult reforms, and if it did sign on to RCEP, it would have had to go ahead and push on those reforms.
Well, just to wrap up and pick up from where Vikram left off, as he said, there are many significant economies in this region that want India into RCEP, the Japanese being a very important one. And I'm sure they'll continue to keep trying. But I also want to make one last point, which is that Mr. Modi also met with the ASEAN leaders in Bangkok. And while he was categorical about RCEP, he actually spoke about an upgraded ASEAN-India FTA. So it's not like India is completely pulling out of all free trade agreements, but it is being very picky on where it wants to go. And it is going to decide a whole lot of things based on its interests and where it sees its friends and allies and where it sees people not being sympathetic to its own concerns.
Excellent point. Thank you very much, Ravi. Thank you very much, Vikram, for making time. Much appreciated. Right. So in this new and fluid environment, everything is up for negotiation and renegotiation. Until just about 3 years ago, the TPP seemed on track. It still is, but minus the United States. And until a few days ago, literally, the RCEP seemed to be on track. It still is, but minus India. We shall have to watch what happens in this new and fluid environment. For Asian Insider, I'm Nirmal Ghosh.
To see the full video, visit our website at straitstimes.com. And now on to our new segment, What's Trending, where Kim will take us through the top trending stories today. Kim?
Thanks, Dylan. It's time to talk trending on What's Trending. Our first story is day 2 of the e-scooter ban. Check out how some hardcore riders are coping. Traveling on grass instead of the footpaths? But it could be a case of jumping out of the frying pan and into the fire, as damaging the grass can land you a fine of up to $5,000. Upset PMD riders have also taken to ranting on the internet to air their grievances.
Wow, You know, when I deliver food halfway, I receive this notification. Wow! I read this news, ridiculous leh. PMD. Hey, forget it, Don't waste time on PMD lah. Hey.
So what do you think? Will their concerns be addressed? Let us know in the comment section below. Now, a horrifying video of worms apparently emerging from sausages has been making its way around the internet. Have a look. The Singapore Food Agency released a statement on their Facebook page appealing for more information from those who were affected. Now, the importer of Valley Chef Chicken Franks, Da Chong Hong Limited, told citizen journalist website Stomp that the floating white bits are not actually worms. Let's hope they're right. And finally, don't want to call yourself single? Try self-partnered. That's what actress Emma Watson calls herself in a British Vogue magazine interview on Tuesday. She said, "It took me a long time, but I'm very happy. I call it being self-partnered." The 29-year-old said she faced immense stress as she approached her 30th birthday thanks to increasing pressure on her to start a family. But now she seems content where she is. Good for you, Emma Watson. That's all we have for What's Trending today. If you think a story is worth sharing, do tag us using the hashtag #STBigStory. Back to you, Dylan.
Thanks, Kim. Visitors to the Singapore Zoo may have noticed an overhead bridge being built along Mandai Lake Road, but the Mandai Wildlife Bridge is not for use by humans. Officially unveiled today and set to open in December, it is meant for animals to cross safely, the latest in a slew of measures to reduce roadkill. Several rare animals, including a critically endangered pangolin and a leopard cat, have been reportedly killed by vehicles in the area ever since work for a nature precinct of 5 wildlife parks started early last year. Trees and shrubs will be planted on the bridge so it will resemble a multi-layered forest habitat. To discuss more about this, we have environment correspondent Audrey Tan. Hey Audrey.
Hi Dylan.
Welcome back. Now it's good to see that the Mandai Bridge is up and running, but it hasn't been all that smooth sailing, right?
Yeah, so this project itself has come under a lot of fire from the nature group since it was first mooted, I think, around 2014. But what has really riled the nature community up was that since work started in 2017 for 2 new wildlife parks to join the zoo, Night Safari and River Safari, there have been a number of native animals that have ended up as roadkill on Mandai Lake Road. Right. So Mandai Lake Road is the road that people would have to drive through in order to reach the zoo at the end. So the Mandai Lake Road actually separates, it sits right next to the Central Catchment Nature Reserve. So the land on which the 2 new parks will be built, it is state land, so it's not really protected land, but you have forests that have regenerated over time. So, you know, animals, they don't really respect all these boundaries. They have come and gone for quite a long time. So when work started in 2017, some of the animals have actually been found as roadkill on Mandai Lake Road. Includes critically endangered animals, including a leopard cat and a Sunda pangolin. And so it's not been that smooth sailing since the precinct was first mentioned by a few years ago. So since then, the developer Mandai Park Holdings have undertaken a slew of measures to try to reduce these incidents, and the Wildlife Bridge is the latest one that was unveiled to the media today. Other than that, on Mandai Lake Road, people can also see rope ladders which will help arboreal or tree-dwelling species cross from trees on one side to trees to the other. And there are also underground culverts that pangolins can go through, and we hope that with all these measures in place, it would reduce the incidence of roadkill.
Now, Audrey, you know, you had an inside tour of the facility earlier today, and since it's restricted access, of course, to the public, you can tell us a bit more about what's in the facility. Okay, so it's essentially, right now it looks like a park connector, but when the trees are fully mature and they grow up, it would actually resemble like a forest landscape. So the reason why the trees and the shrubs that are being planted will aim to create like a multi-layer landscape, because when you talk about a healthy forest, you don't just have the tall trees, you have the underbrush like the shrubs and the smaller trees, and each layer will cater to a different kind of animal, whether it's a ground dwelling animal like a pangolin, or for colugos, they are tree dwelling species that they glide from tree to tree. So it is essential that there are so many layers on the Wildlife Bridge as well, and that is what we saw today. Saplings are being planted. So the developers say that it may take maybe 5 to 10 years before the vegetation fully matures, because the trees need time to grow. But when it is fully up, and by the time the 2 new parks are open, I think we can expect to see that it will resemble something like the forest in the Central Catchment Nature Reserve.
similar to like what we see on the BKE Ecolink now.
The bridge. Well, thanks Audrey for sharing with us more about the new wildlife bridge. We certainly hope that it helps the animals and helps us to reduce the roadkill, because it's really very sad to see all the animals, being hit by cars. Now, those were the top stories of the day. For more news and videos, do head on down to our website at straitstimes.com. And once again, I'm Dylan, and thanks for watching The Big Story, and we will see you tomorrow.